let's go ahead and start back in our study here as we look at a study here on evolution. And we've been looking at Darwin and his theory, and we are here now at natural selection. And we see that natural selection cannot see the future or work toward a goal. Okay, this is important because this is what they say guided this whole process of evolution, but natural selection cannot see the future, nor can it work toward a goal. So it would not select something that would not be helpful for the creature's immediate survival. Okay, so natural selection is not going to allow it to select something that's not going to immediately benefit it, all right? This will make sense the more we go. Here's what Darwin himself said. We may feel sure that any variation in the least degree injurious would be destroyed. So it's not going to happen if it's injurious, if it's not beneficial. This means that partly formed structures such as a partial wing would not be preserved. Okay, that makes sense, right? Evolutionists believe that one creature changed into another creature by small changes happening over millions of years. Evolutionists say that the bird evolved from a small reptile dinosaur like this. Now, they've never found anything like that, but there's some good artists, right, to put this stuff together. All right, this is the model at the Australian Museum in Sydney. All right, you look at something like that, especially when a child looks at something like that, it's very believable, is it not? I think so. The dinosaur supposedly began to grow feathers and wings and gradually became a bird. Okay, but natural selection is not going to pick something that's not going to immediately help it. Okay. This is how they depict the part dinosaur and part bird as it evolved. It has feathers and small wings and a beak, but it still wouldn't be able to fly. All right, so evolution, it's over millions of years, and here's the big thing. I say this a bunch, but if you start arguing about evolution with somebody, they're going to say, well, it takes so long that you can't necessarily see all the changes, so we're all in the process of evolving right now. Well, how come we don't see things like this then? How come everything's already fit, form, and function? It already works the way it is. How come there's nothing like in between like this? We don't see any of that. We don't observe any of that. Again, what is the type of evolution that we can observe that Darwin actually observed? And I use the term evolution because that's the term they use. I don't necessarily agree with it. But there's two types of evolution, if you remember. There's microevolution and macroevolution. Okay, microevolution is small changes, and I'm going to use a Bible word for it. It's small changes within a kind. Okay, because you go back to Genesis and God made them after this kind, and they reproduce after this kind, right? Okay, that's how the Bible uses it. So microevolution, think small, micro, is small changes within a kind. And again, the example I always give is just look at all of us here. We all have the same type of features, but they're all different, right? Some of us are taller, smaller, shorter, different color hair, different size noses, different size ears, all of that stuff, okay? There's differences within a kind. You look at a Chihuahua and a German Shepherd, and you can tell there's a big difference, right? But guess what? You don't think. You don't think, man, that must be a cat and that must be a dog. No, you think those are both dogs. You know they're dogs. That's a difference. That's microevolution, changes within a kind, okay? There's just so many examples that could be given. What is never observed is macroevolution, and that's Darwinian evolution. Sorry, that's Darwinian evolution is macroevolution, changing from, a bird to a dinosaur. That's what you never see. So the examples that evolutionists are always going to use are microevolution. The examples we can see that we do observe. That's what Darwin's finches, right? The birds that he observed, they have different sized beaks and all this, but they were all still birds. They were all still birds. We didn't see anything changing, okay? All right, the models in museums show the part bird with two fully formed wings. But evolution would need to start with the dinosaur growing a part of a wing. Even if this could happen, it would be of no advantage to the creature, right? Why would it even need that? And these are the things like, think through it. If they're teaching us this, why would it even need to start developing a wing and feathers? Why? For what purpose? There's no purpose. So why would it do that? And again, if we go back to last week, kind of catch us up on some things, natural selection cannot add to the DNA. It can only select from what's already there. It's natural selection. It cannot bring anything to the table. So where is this information from? All right. In fact, it would be a crippled monster like a four-winged fruit fly. According to evolution, the process is blind and cannot see the future or plan toward a goal. Natural selection can't do that. It's blind and can't see the future, so it doesn't know what it's going to need. This is insane to me. I can't believe they even push this stuff off. Consider whale evolution. Evolutionists say the whale evolved from a wolf-like creature. This is the model at the British Museum of Natural History. Does that make any sense? How can right-thinking people believe this? Okay, here's the process of evolution when you take it back. They say we crawled out of the primordial soup. Okay, that the earth was basically a rock with water on it, and then lightning hit it, then organism began to evolve, and then slowly we, mankind, crawled out of the water onto dry land and evolved into all these different things. And then out of nowhere, he said, you know what? This dog-looking thing said, you know what? Let's go back to the water. This is the process that evolutionists are teaching us here. So now they're going to go back into the water to become a whale. Well, why wouldn't it have made more sense to just evolve into a whale from the get-go, right? But that's the process that they teach. Okay, so this thing turned into a whale. And look, there it is. This is from the website. This is embarrassing. Of the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's educational website. The theory of whale evolution. There it is. See, they're getting bigger, so it must be true, right? They show a wolf-like creature gradually changing into various other types of creatures, finally becoming a whale. This chart at the Pacific Science Center in Seattle depicts all of the whales descending from a little wolf-like creature. There it is up at the top left, and all of those came from that. This is how the National Geographic describes it. The whale's ascendancy to sovereign size apparently, see the language that they use, like catch this stuff. It apparently, we don't know, it just apparently this is what happened. Anything but God, right? When you see that, apparently, things like that, or we believe, just put in there anything but God, okay? That's what they're saying. The whale's ascendancy to sovereign size apparently began 60 million years ago when hairy, four-legged mammals in search of food or sanctuary ventured into the water. As eons passed, so much time, changes slowly occurred. Hind legs disappeared, front legs changed into flippers, hair gave way to a thick, smooth blanket of blubber, nostrils moved to the top of the head, the tail broadened into flukes, and in the buoyant water world, the body became enormous. That's it right there. There's their explanation. That's from December 1976. Here's a man standing on the ocean floor near a whale. Look at that. That's crazy. That's a cool picture. All right, how could this happen if a wolf started growing a flipper? What would happen to that creature? It'd be a crippled monster. What's it going to do? I mean, even if it's as long as the other legs, what is it going to do with that? How's it going to get around? How's it going to chase animals and feed and live and survive? Why would it create something that's not going to benefit it? That doesn't make any sense. For natural selection requires competition for survival of the fittest, but nature shows more interrelatedness. Darwin described nature as being everywhere, red in tooth and claw, but this is not true. Though there is tooth and claw in nature since the fall, we do not observe the everywhere fought struggle for survival via competition that Darwin's theory demands. The universe is a massive interrelated system, which is evident from the level of the galaxies to the living cell to the atom. Consider the laws of physics. Charles Townes, Nobel Prize-winning physicist, said this. This is a very special universe. It's remarkable that it came out just this way. If the laws of physics weren't just the way they are, we couldn't be here at all. The sun couldn't be there. The laws of gravity and nuclear laws and magnetic theory, quantum mechanics, and so on have to be just the way they are for us to be here. I don't say that someone has to necessarily fall in line with my beliefs in a 6-day creation. Like, I hope they would, but I don't say somebody has to. But if you're at least I want to be kind in this. If you're at least going to be honest intellectually, if you're going to be honest intellectually, at the very least, even reading something just like that, you have to recognize there has to be, at the very least, an intelligent designer. At the very least, an intelligent designer. Because there's no way all of this is going to work outside of that. There's too much planning. There's too much to all of creation to not think that there's at the very least, an intelligent designer. He goes on to say, astronomer Paul Davies says this. On the face of it, the universe does look as if it has been designed by an intelligent creator expressly for the purpose of spawning sentient beings. Like the porridge in the tale of Goldilocks and the Three Bears, the universe seems to be just right for life. There are interconnections and symbiotic relationships everywhere. Biologists call this mutualism, environmental community, biosphere, biosystem, ecosystems, holism. Systems ecology is the study of nature as a gigantic system. Just everything basically working together. All of this is evidence of design and creation, not of natural selection. Exactly. Humans and intestinal bacteria. Bacteria are not part of the human body, but they do things the body cannot do for itself, but which are necessary for its survival. They synthesize vitamins essential for nutrition, such as vitamin K, niacin, and B complex vitamins. Friendly bacteria kill harmful bacteria, such as pathogens. Bacteria synthesize niacin to make NAD, which is necessary for energy conversion in the cell's mitochondria. The human body itself cannot synthesize NAD, but it is essential to life. So we need these bacteria. Termites and microscopic protozoa. The termite eats wood, but it is his parasites that break down the cellulose structure while sharing enough nutrients to keep the termite alive. Neither the termite nor the protozoa can live without the other, so they both need each other. They're working together. Acacia tree and acacia ants. This is pretty neat. The ants live in a tree colony that may number 30,000. The tree gives them food and they give it protection from herbivores by attacking any other insects that try to feed on the tree. Doctor researcher Daniel Jansen found that the trees cannot survive without their ants. They protect it. Fish and bacteria flashlights. This is neat too. The flashlight fish depends on colonies of luminescent bacteria to pack its light organs. The fish furnishes the bacteria with food in a stable environment, and the bacteria serve as the fish's light. The fish controls the light by means of an eyelid-like shutter. Now, how did that happen by chance? I mean, this stuff is amazing. How in the world did that happen? By chance, unless there was a designer that made this. Like, that's the only way. How did it know it needed a flashlight? Like, seriously, and how did it know? Let me go find these, what were they, bacteria, these luminescent bacteria, so they can give me a flashlight. The shrimp and the goby fish. The snapping shrimp and the goby fish have a symbiotic relationship. The shrimp has poor eyesight and is dependent on the goby for protection. The shrimp builds the system of tunnels that they live in. When the shrimp goes outside, it keeps one antenna on the goby. If danger approaches, the goby signals and disappears inside the burrow with the shrimp right behind him. Pollination. The pollination system is a finely tuned symbiotic process. It involves countless different types of flowers, insects, and birds, all perfectly integrated to maintain life. In flowers, the process usually involves transferring the pollen grains from the stamen to the stigma. The result is the formation of a seed. Sometimes the transfer is done by air, but usually it's done by insects and birds. These are the bewildering number of different systems for pollination. Just among orchids alone, there are hundreds of different methods. Each one of these is amazingly complex, and the process is hardwired in the DNA of the plant and animal, except for minor variations. Nectar. Many orchids produce sweet nectar to attract insects. The nectar itself is complex, being composed of sugar, amino acids, lipids, organic acids, minerals, vitamins, enzymes, antioxidants, ions, and metabolites. Odor. Different orchids use different types of odors to attract pollinators. Some even use the odor of rotting meat to attract flies and carrion beetles. The stench of Bulbophyllum beccari is said to smell like a herd of dead elephants. That's glad we don't have those here. All right, color. Other orchids use color to attract pollinators. Those that are pollinated by hummingbirds and butterflies tend to have red, orange, and pink flowers, which are not necessarily fragrant. So if you want hummingbirds and butterflies, have red, orange, and pink flowers. Mimicry. The moth orchid has blooms that look like moths, and the wind makes it flutter like a moth, attracting real moths. Or mimicry, maybe is how you pronounce that. The Ophrys family of orchids look like the female of the bee species that pollinates them. This is just amazing. Some Ophrys look like flies. Like, you see the design in it. I mean, you can see here how it could look like a bee. Over here, how it could look like a moth. Sexual deception. Some orchids attract a specific type of male insect by producing a chemical odor that imitates the sex pheromones of the female. He is thus tricked into landing on the flower and picking up pollen to carry to another flower. There is sexual deception when the plant imitates the appearance of a female insect. The lip of the looking glass orchid is surrounded by a fringe of red hairs, just like those on the body of the female wasp. And there is a bluish mirror-like patch in the center of the lip, which looks like her shimmering wings. And there you can see it. There's a perfect timing involved in pollination. The looking glass orchid is visited only by male wasps of one particular species. Look at how specific that gets. Just one particular species. The males emerge 1 month before the females, which is exactly when the looking glass orchid flowers. That's pretty perfect. Pretty good timing. Traps. The bucket orchid has a little bucket of nectar. Above it is a rounded pad that is saturated with a fragrant oil that male bees like to pack into the sacs on their back legs to use to court females. It happens to smell like the pheromones bees use to attract mates. Since the surface of the flower is slippery, a bee often slips into the bucket. The only way to escape drowning is through a narrow channel at the base of the lip, and as the bee squeezes out, 2 grains of sticky pollen are deposited on his back. That's pretty good right there. Roads. Some orchids produce long petals that trail to the ground to make a road for crawling insects that leads right to their pollen. Shooting pollen. The Catasetum orchid has a little hair trigger mechanism that when touched fires a sticky pollen at the insect. High-speed photography has found that the amazing trigger fires at 1.3 meters per second. And this is a plant. Man, that's pretty good. The trigger mechanism is tuned only to be set off only when the right size bee lands on it. Things like wind or falling water or lighter insects do not affect it. And think about the design in that. How perfect that is. That's crazy. Charles Darwin actually wrote a book entitled On the Various Contrivances by which British and foreign orchids are fertilized by insects. His favorite was the Catasetum fimbriatum with its little trigger. Here's the little trigger mechanism at work. All right, let's go with that again, huh? That's fast. Darwin was so blind to think that all of this mind-boggling complexity and this beautiful symbiosis could have evolved naturally. Why would it? Why would all these same orchids, why would they all develop a different method of attracting, insects to take their pollen different places? Why would that happen? For what purpose? Would they pick different methods? It doesn't make any sense. Coevolution. Evolutionists speak of coevolution. The concept was invented by Alfred Wallace, who published a report on evolution by natural selection before Darwin. He had this insight while practicing witchcraft in South America. In virtually all cases, the orchid and pollinator have evolved together. They're, coevolution. The buff-tailed sickle-bill hummingbird beside one of the flowers to which they're specialized, showing how the flower and recurved bill have co-evolved. When Darwin examined the Madagascar orchid with its 11-inch nectar tube, he predicted that a moth would be found with an 11-inch proboscis. Sure enough, in 1903, 21 years after Darwin's death, the Morgan's sphinx moth was discovered. It was first filmed in its nocturnal routine in 2004 by Philip DeVries.
It's hovering in front of the orchid. There it is. Look at the tongue's coming out, man. Amazing. Look at that. There it goes. It's trying to find the opening. There it goes. It's in.
Beautiful design. You can see design in all of this. Evolutionists say, see, Darwin was right, it's coevolution, but such evolution would have had to have taken place literally the same week, which sounds more like creation. That's how it would have had to happen, right? I mean, how would that flower continue if they didn't absolutely evolve together or vice versa? So there's their coevolution, but it all looks more like design. It's perfectly designed to work together. I mean, what if the insect or whatever, was it I don't remember what it was, if it was the moth. What if the moth didn't develop at the same rate as the flower? Then how would the flower continue its life? How would it continue to get pollinated? they had to happen together. So what if one didn't happen at the same time? How did they know they both needed to do this at the same time? You see, like, the problems that start arising with all of this. A vast amount of perfect genetic information and processes are involved in producing an orchid and a moth that operate in such perfect harmony. No Darwinian process accounts for such a thing. This is simply circular reasoning. They assume that evolution happened. Okay, so this is like, let's talk about this for just a sec. This is a person's worldview. So what is your worldview? Well, I come at it, my worldview is a biblical worldview. I come at it from belief in the Bible, belief in the Word of God, and then I see how does the world fit into that understanding. And that makes sense. I mean, when you look at everything and how things happen, that's what makes sense. But an evolutionist worldview, on the other hand, is that, well, evolution happened, so therefore there's no God really, or maybe there's a God, but I'm not going to really look at that because I believe everything just slowly evolved over eons of time, right? So that's how they're coming to this. That's how they're looking at things. So instead of seeing design, they come up with this stuff. Because, and here's the main reason. This is really ultimately what it comes down to when somebody is just a diehard evolutionist and doesn't want to see that creation's even a possibility. It comes down to simply that I want to live my life the way I want to live it, free of God. I don't want the guilt of a creator telling me what I can and can't do. That's ultimately what it comes down to. It's like the brass tacks, that's it. Okay? So they assume that evolution happened, so they conclude that these things must have co-evolved. Without that assumption, there is no evidence. All right? So it must have happened like this because we know that evolution is true. All right, consider the Earth's ecosystem. You don't know you're going to be in science class today, right? Modern science has disproven evolution by learning that we live in a fantastically complex, interrelated system. Right? The trees need carbon dioxide, we breathe it out. The trees make oxygen, we breathe it in. Right? What's your carbon footprint? You know, and then they okay, I'm going to get off of that. Let's just keep going. All right, the oxygen cycle. Plants take in carbon dioxide and produce oxygen. Animals take in oxygen and breathe out carbon dioxide. We work together. We help each other. The water cycle, vapor, buoyancy, condensation, precipitation, soil, permeation, distribution. It all happens. So you've got just that circle going through this process to continually keep giving us the water that we need. Interesting. I had an uncle who used to work for one of the city water companies in California, and they sent him to a training, and he was telling me about it. And this was probably like about, let's see, 15 years ago probably. And he was telling me that he said in that training, they were telling them that there's never more water on the earth. There's never more or less water on the earth. It's always the same amount of water. That amount doesn't change. It's always the same. It's just, you know, what form is it in and where is it at? Like there's a drought maybe here, but there's flooding happening over here. He says, but the water amount, it stays the same, is what they were telling him in that. But it's always going through this cycle. It's always somewhere. Plants and their ecosystem. The living, growing biosphere is a complex interwoven network of nutrients and animal and plant life. There is interconnectedness between soil, microbes, plants, pests, and human health. Once you start to connect all the dots, you begin to understand the depth of nature's intelligence, which always strives to maintain balance. Plants can hear themselves being eaten. Merkle.com from 2014. So it all works together. They decompose. They help to feed the plants. Animals eat the plants. There's animals that eat the animals that eat the plants, and it all works together. Dr. Suzanne Simard, University of British Columbia, What Plants Talk About.
But while evolutionary theory told a story about competition, the trees themselves were telling her a different story.
We think of them as these individuals that are just competing against each other. You know, I'm going to get this and I'm going to get it and you're not going to get it. And that's really led a lot of the thinking. And we've long ignored, you know, a lot of the other interactions other than competition. But at the same time, there's a community effect that we haven't understood. And we're just starting to really look at this and understand that that this is a system. It's not just a bunch of individuals competing against each other. They're working together to make the system work.
So the trees are working together to make the system work. Plants communicate with other plants through the air via chemical signals. They have communication. Look, that's a good picture for us, right? Because we get that. We understand that. Watch out, mate. Aphids are about. And by connections made underground via fungi. So they communicate like that as well. We're going to stop here. I'll pick up with this next week. Hope this has been a help to us. You know, the whole reason we're doing this is so that we have a solid foundation to build our Christian lives on, that we don't have to fear, you know, evolution or evolutionists and what they believe. And I really want to do this for all of us, but especially young people that may be bombarded with, excuse me, with an attack on their faith. And I don't want anyone to lose their faith because they think that the Bible doesn't have the answers when the Bible does have the answers. It just depends on what worldview you're looking at. A lot of times people don't want to see the answers. They don't want to be honest with themselves. And we, as God's people, should always be willing to want to see the answers, want to know the truth. Even if that means we may have to change what we believe. Even if that means we may have to change what we believe. The Bible should always be able to correct us. The Bible should always be able to correct God's people. If we were right on everything, then we'd be God, wouldn't we? So we're not right on everything. So we might have a good understanding of the Bible and we're sound doctrinally, but it doesn't mean we can't be wrong in something as well. And we need to recognize that and then understand that, hey, maybe I may be wrong about this a little bit. I might not be completely wrong, but I may be off just a little bit and need to tweak it. So we need to have that humility about us and be willing to make the changes that are necessary. But also, you know, we want to be able to stand on what we know is truth and what we know the Bible teaches and what the Bible says and have that firm foundation to build on. All right, so with that, let's go ahead.